All right, and welcome back to the First Year Teacher podcast. This conversation is with Liz Fennell. She currently works for Boston College's Roche Center for Catholic Education, and she started out her career in education by doing the ACE program through Notre Dame, that stands for Alliance for Catholic Education. And I'm going to be doing the same program this coming year, and so I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Liz Fennell. Well, then maybe we could start by you introducing yourself and what you do now, and then take it back to that first year of teaching. That sounds like a really interesting story.
Sure. So I'm Liz Fennell, and I currently work at the Roche Center for Catholic Education at BC, and I work with their leadership program. So working with superintendents of Catholic schools and then principals of Catholic schools and those who are in a degree program working to become leaders in Catholic schools. But if I were to go way back now, I went to BC undergrad. Go Eagles. And then after BC, I did the ACE program. And so I was placed in Biloxi, Mississippi. I was to teach second grade. And so I started at St. Peter the Apostle. I did, our summer of learning at Notre Dame, and then trekked down to Mississippi. And we had 1 week of teacher meetings and 2 full weeks of school, and then Hurricane Katrina hit. And I was an ignorant girl from Rhode Island who thought, oh, hurricane, maybe we'll lose power, or like maybe a tree would fall down and like it could damage a house. I had no idea what a hurricane in the South right on the water could mean. And so one of my community members and I evacuated up to Jackson, Mississippi. So it was just 3 hours north of where we were. They were a self-contained community. And so truthfully, we just ignorantly took it as, oh, we'll have a weekend with our friends. Yeah. We went to like a reservoir. This is really making me sound bad. No. We went to a reservoir on that Saturday, like almost like Mississippi's version of a beach, like inland. And the whole time my parents are calling saying, like, what are you doing to prepare? Because even though we weren't on the water, Jackson was still in the track of the storm. Like, do you guys have food? Have you, just like the preparation of like even water, like filling the tubs and all that. And we're just like, it's beautiful out. It's 85 degrees. Like, we're with our friends. Yeah. If there's a mandatory evacuation, it means we're not going to have school on Monday.
Long weekend.
Like, this is a long weekend. We're good. It's beautiful. There's no wind. And then the storm hit, obviously, our community before where we were, up a little further north. And it was awful. So huge winds, obviously, a lot of tornadoes get spun up, and then the storm surge was just devastating. And so, everything miles inland was just completely flooded underwater for a good amount of time, and then the water recedes and just leaves all the damage in the wake. And so I got a call from my principal, and she just said, it's awful. And so she stayed, and so she was there through it. And we were not, so even in Jackson, the storm hit, and so there was no power. Definitely trees came down. We literally saw a big, huge tree go down across the street and into the home that was across the street and just like annihilate that house. So there was no power there. And so what we ended up doing was we were nomads from Ace house to Ace house trying to find power. So the kids in Jackson, they were trying to get out. So some people lived close by, so they not close, but they were going to go to their families' homes. And so my community member, Will, who I had traveled with, he was from Ireland, and so he didn't have a car, he didn't have a license. So we were these nomads for electricity, so to speak. So we went from Jackson to Mobile, which is pretty close to Pascagoula, but we couldn't get back into Pascagoula, like bridges were out and whatnot. And then we went over to Pensacola. So Mobile still didn't have power. So then we went to Pensacola. We're able to charge our phones and like call our families. And then originally I was thinking, to head back towards home is what ACE was telling us to do in the beginning. And so I'm from Rhode Island. So then we went to Jacksonville, Florida, thinking that we'd get on 95 and go up. But then when we were in Jacksonville, it was Labor Day weekend, and we got a call from ACE saying, hold up, like, don't go anywhere. Although where you were was devastated. Now all the people who evacuated or getting out are now, there's an influx in all these surrounding areas. So we might need you at an ACE school in Texas. So here we are in Jacksonville, and we're like, okay. So now we're slowly making our way back. So we go take a day and we get to Pensacola and take another day and get to Mobile. And kind of just edging our way back to head towards Texas. And we were able to get to Pascagoula. And so we pulled into the town and we went by the school, and literally the first image was our principal, Sister Bernadette McNamara, this nun from Ireland, was literally dragging a humongous garbage bag over her shoulder to the street because their convent, the school is the first thing that hits, is that a tornado kind of sliced right through the whole length of the building. So all of our classrooms were exposed to the open air. And so the convent was right next to the school. And so she was clearing out the convent. So obviously we pulled in and that became our day, helping to clear out the convent with the nuns who taught at the school. At the end of the day, we went to where our ACE house was. And all around the house, everything is destroyed, from the water, from the wind, and somehow miraculously our little ACE house was fully intact.
Wow.
It was crazy. No one stayed. We all evacuated because we had the means to. But it sounds like if we had, I guess we would have been okay. But when Will and I, this is a great story too, when Will and I went to go check out the house, we went to unlock the door and someone opened the door. A stranger was in our house, and no joke, it was a kid. He was in my BC Superfan t-shirt. It was just mind-boggling, oh, hi. And so what happened was, again, this was pretty soon after we moved in. So we really didn't know many people, but families from around whose homes were destroyed saw that no one was at our house and our house was fine. So 5 families came in and were living in our house.
Wow.
So we packed up a little bag. Obviously less stuff for them too, but we packed up little bags so that we had some stuff, and we ended up commuting back and forth and living with Mobile. So that year, Mobile's community charism was hospitality. And I like to joke, I don't know if this is the case, but I like to joke that after that experience, because we lived with them for 6 weeks, that they never chose hospitality as their charism again. But ultimately in those 6 weeks, so when we first heard, the diocese was basically saying the earliest anyone would be back in school would be after Christmas. And remember, this is the end of August, beginning of September, August. Right? Wow. And but we were pretty committed to staying in the community and helping the schools and the people. And so ACE was fine with that whole plan of maybe going to help teach in Texas wasn't going to happen. We were going to stay. We could stay in Mobile, and then we just drove back and forth to Pascagoula each day. And so in some ways, saying yes to the call to serve, although going into it, I fully thought I was saying yes to a call to serve as a teacher. Really, I think the way that I was called to serve in that beginning time was much more in line with what you'd think of in a college service trip, right? Going down and helping a community after a storm. So our school never reopened. We ended up integrating in with another Catholic school that actually wasn't far away from our Catholic school. It was called Resurrection Catholic Elementary School, so symbolic there. And what happened there was that school was really damaged as well. The structure was standing, but the water had like gone through and pulled out. And so it was just this empty shell. So, I mean, ultimately, sure, we could have waited to start school after Christmas, but the reality was these kids had nowhere to go because their homes were just as devastated. And so everyone knew, the teachers, the parents, everyone knew that the kids just needed a safe place to be. And so everyone worked hard to clear out the building and make it clean and have a safe place to be. We had no desks, chairs, rugs, chalk, pencil, paper, crayons, books, none of that. We didn't even have doors. But we went, and it was a place to come where the kids could be together, where we could be with them. And it was just unbelievable how resilient the kids were, how able they were to, despite all that was going on in their lives, to like come and be and learn and play and laugh. And I think their laughter and their joy really brought a lot of hope to a lot of people, the teachers and their parents for sure. So that first year, the school that I combined in with had 2 classes for every grade. So they, of course, already had a full faculty. So we, in a sense, kind of departmentalized a little bit. So I didn't have a homeroom, but I taught math and science and social studies in each of the second grade classrooms. And then my specific class ended up getting split in half. So that half were in one of the second grades and half were in the other. So I still got to be with all of them. But again, when you're coming off of this like ACE summer where you've like learned all these different practices and in your mind, you've hyped yourself up as like, okay, I'm going to be a classroom teacher, that all of a sudden I was, in a sense, more kind of like a student teacher, right? Because I'm coming under these 2 mentors who were so experienced and so good at what they did, that ultimately, if I take a step back, I can see what a gift it was and how much they really shaped me as a teacher. But at the time, with like, your young ego, you're like, well, what did I sign up for? Like I thought I was I was their teacher for 3 whole weeks. Like, and now all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know, running copies for everyone, or no, because we didn't have a machine, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a humbling experience, but it was such a gift to be there. And I really do feel like there was a real like contentness and even joy in knowing that I was serving like that call even though it wasn't necessarily how I initially thought I was called to serve.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. That's crazy.
So watch out. You never know what next year will bring.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I guess that's amazing. And there was something that you said in there about how after this hurricane has basically run through this school and kind of washed out pretty much everything besides the structure, that the school is then served the purpose of being a safe place for kids to go. It sounds like, and to play and to laugh. And it sounds like, without over glorifying or romanticizing it, it sounds like it kind of strips it down to really the real purpose of what the school is supposed to be, um, as a safe place for you to build community and try to learn something, but primarily to share life and build community. Um, I'm interested to hear you talk about maybe what's special about Catholic schools.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's special about Catholic schools as opposed to, maybe there's all kinds of different types of schools, but perhaps that image is sticking with me. Perhaps it might shed a little bit of light on that.
Sure. I mean, I think what is so unique about Catholic school is that faith is at the center of every single one of them. And so, honestly, in being in that experience, it'd be so easy to say, how could this awful thing happen to so many people? I mean, people lost lives, people obviously lost their homes, people lost their jobs. It'd be so easy to say, where's God? How is there how does a good God let this happen to good people? But what I really learned through the people of Pascagoula, through the teachers, through the community members, through the students, was that it wasn't a like God's not here. It's a God is with us through it all. God is with us through this hard time. So similar to the school being this empty shell, the parish next to it was still standing, but everything was cleared out. And yet we still gathered every week for Mass. And so one of the songs that the kids would sing was How Can I Keep From Singing? And so one of the lines is, or the main line is, no storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since life is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? And so it was just so powerful to hear these kids whose lives have just been completely turned upside down, to just be so joyful in singing that and coming together. And like I said, they were just these signs of hope for everyone. But between, being able to witness that faith and being able to practice that faith together and find strength in that faith to be able to bring everyone through that hard time, I think that is something that's so strongly unique to Catholic schools, is that the faith is ever present. It's not necessarily that everyone who is in the school is Catholic, right? I know there's someone probably even way more famous than my principal, but what my principal always used to say in her Irish accent was, we don't educate them because they're Catholic. We educate them because we're Catholic, right? And so, so despite, it might not even be that I'm saying, oh, what's different about a Catholic school is that everyone in there is Catholic and that we can all share faith. It's not that. It's that because we are a Catholic school and that is our base and our foundation, we then together are able to share in this, these practices, these teachings, these beliefs, these values, this mission of what is a Catholic education, what is the Catholic faith, that is so intrinsic in everything that we're doing and how we're learning and how we're treating each other, that that is something that I think is a rock that we could all stand on during that crazy time.
It is a crazy time. And so that's your first year, that's your first experience ever teaching, and you decided that you wanted to stick with it after after literally a hurricane being ripped through your school. So what did that look like after that first year?
Sure. So talk about people being selfless. What ended up happening was obviously our school had never reopened and we stayed with Resurrection. But what ACE knew was that I obviously needed X amount of hours as like the full classroom teacher. And so there was talk of, if there was not an opening, right, because this is basically like two school staffs coming together, then they were going to have to find a new placement for me so that I could get in those hours, so that I could earn the certification and the degree and all that. And Kathy Groff, my dear friend and mentor, one of the second grade teachers, literally like to this day, the best example of what a good teacher is. She selflessly said, I'll step back, I'll work in the library for the year so that Liz can be the full second grade classroom teacher, so that she can stay in this community, so that she can be, not uprooted and be able to stay with the students and everything else. So that second year, I was a more traditional, I guess you'd say, second grade classroom teacher, self-contained, so taught all the subjects, taught First Reconciliation and First Communion, preparation anyway, taught those, didn't do the sacraments. And then, and I think that way, in a sense, had more of a typical experience of maybe what a normal first year of teaching may have looked like. And then from there, I actually went and worked for ACE for a few years. And so worked with teachers who were currently in the program. And then moved to Boston, and I taught here at an all-girls Catholic school Newton Country Day of the Sacred Heart. I taught religion and dance at the middle school and high school levels. Then took some time, and I have 3 boys. And so Patrick is 10, Michael is 8, and Matthew is 5, and they all go to our Catholic school here. And during that time, I was involved in Catholic Ed still, not formally through working, but I was on a couple school boards, or the Catholic Schools Foundation. Here is the foundation where a lot of funds for financial aid go in, and then schools apply for the funding. And so I'm on their allocations committee. Also Notre Dame has, it started out, I'd say, as an alumni group for ACE. So it was called ACE Fellowship nationally. And then it switched over, it's called ACE Advocates for Catholic Education. And so I was the chair of that for, I guess, about 11 years. And so just really fostered a community for definitely ACE grads, but then uniquely around here, we have BC has a similar program, the Urban Catholic Teacher Corps, and then Providence College has a similar program, the PACT program. And so it was neat that here, alums of those programs and even teachers who are currently in the program since they're placed here could all come together in community. So pre-COVID, we would meet monthly for Mass just over at BC's STM. And then we'd have pizza after. And then we do different things to serve Catholic schools in the area. So we would do a senior essay night. So we'd work with the seniors at Cristo Rey Boston on their college essays. And then we would, in the spring, work with Catholic elementary school. We'd do like a service day and just do whatever it was that the school needed, cleaning up the yard, painting inside, stuff like that. And so I think I myself am a product of Catholic Ed, kindergarten through my master's. And I'm just so grateful for the gifts that I've been given through that opportunity at all those Catholic schools, that I've always had a passion to stay involved and continue to give back to those Catholic schools, whether it be through teaching, whether it be being on the board, or sending my kids there. So.
Right. You mentioned this friend of yours, Kathy Groff, I think was the name, is second grade teacher, and you said she was just the example of what a great teacher is. What is a great Catholic school teacher? What are the skills, habits, attitudes that make a really great teacher?
Sure. I think one element would be a person with a strong faith, right? Who really cherishes their relationship with God, and then can share that with their students at whatever level that is, right? So we were in second grade, and so such a developmental year to be able to do the preparation for reconciliation and First Communion. But I mean, thinking about people who are placed in high schools, whether you're teaching religion or not, just like that example of it's okay to have a relationship with God, like it's not that it's like not cool to have a faith, like when it's unbelievable how these kids will look up to people your age, right? And if you are modeling those things, then they automatically are like, oh, that is cool, So I think strong faith is definitely important. And then with that would come like the mission of Catholic schools, whether it be just in general, like that they want to serve that mission, but also the mission of their specific school, right? I think more and more schools are getting a better hold of what is their specific mission. And so I think it's really important that the teachers in that school find ways to identify with that mission and really live out that mission. But then ultimately, what does it come down to in terms of when I think of Kathy? She loves children. She loves content. Like she loves things like she would have like petrified wood in the classroom, right? She was heartbroken that the storm ruined all of the things that she had collected to be able to teach the kids with over the years, right? So like she just had such a thirst to be able to share her knowledge with the kids, to be able to instill like the love of learning into a kid. And I think through my time at BC, that term cura personalis. So caring for the whole person. So someone who really does care about the development of someone's mind, body, and spirit at, like I said, whatever level, whether it's you're with the littles or, you're with these teenagers at such like pivotal times of growth and development, to really care for that whole person.
Oh, that's wonderful. Um, Connecting to the spirit, I'm curious to hear what you think about this. So I've been working on this thesis project this semester. Um, and basically, the one liner of my thesis is that intrinsic motivation or curiosity in schools is a manifestation of the Holy Spirit and should be fostered and encouraged as such. Um, and I'm really interested in self-directed education, um, giving students freedom to kind of explore their own interests. Um, well, I'm just curious to hear what you think about that concept of self-directed education or um, freedom for students' curiosity. If you have any things that stick out to you after being in Catholic schools, because that's one thing that I hope to next year. I mean, I'm pretty ignorant and I have very little experience in classrooms, but this is one thing that I really hope to include as a teacher is this kind of freedom and for exploration, for play with these concepts.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's kind of my idea.
Sure. Well, when I first saw your email about that, the thing that popped into my head, and if I'm totally off, then you can stop me, but um, was I was thinking about honestly just like the freedom that comes with writing. I think that writing is so important at every grade level, right? So I mean, right now I even have, a 5-year-old who cannot read yet, but like for him to have an opportunity to write, right, to express his feelings, whether it's through pictures, but then also like, in what he believes is a story that then if you ask him to explain it or to read it to you, he knows exactly what it
Oh
says,
yeah.
right? um, all the way through, high school, college essays and everything else, right? I really believe in the importance of the opportunity to write, the freedom um, in that, I guess, segment in order to write, and really just the opportunity to express. And so, yes, of course, you're going to want to like have logistics of like that you're teaching throughout that, right? To be a good writer, but to be able to give the kids the opportunity to share. And one thing that I think about is when I taught 8th grade religion, I would start every class with just a prompt. I mean, it was more so that the kids, if they're coming in from different classes, they like the kids who are in the class already are settled and know that we're going to dive in versus chit chat for the whole period, right? But I would just have a little prompt every single day. They had this writing journal and they would go on it. But one thing that I think was important was they had the ability to turn the page down. So I obviously collected the journals incrementally and would read, but if they put the page down, it meant that it was something that like they didn't want to share. So it's almost giving them the opportunity to be able to like really feel like they can write whatever they want versus being worried about what will my teacher think, or, am I doing this right, or things like that. So I think um, freedom in terms of having that opportunity to freely write, I think is so important. And then as you talk about the Holy Spirit, one of my favorite prayers, just quick, easy, is come Holy Spirit. And so whether it's that you're structuring these classes in that way, or just that increment of like being able to write in that way, but just like really enabling the kids to recognize that they're the ones with like the power of the story, and to be able to like let that spirit flow, to be able to share that story with others.
Yeah, there is something cool about writing in that it has to come from you. It's not coming out from the teacher on. It's like you're producing that. It's kind of like, well, it is an art in that way, I guess. Um, and college essays, I've always thought that of all of the things that college admissions maybe are wrong with them, I think the fact that they force kind of like adolescent people to write about their lives and about like the most meaningful things that have happened to them recently, um, I think that's a really valuable thing. You know,
Mhm.
like I'll still run into people and we'll get talking about something. It's like, oh yeah, I wrote a college essay about that. It's like, and that's like a, at least for people at BC, at least that population, like that's a really that's a marker that this is
Mhm.
something significant and important in your life. I
Mhm.
really do think that that is that's something significant. And so looking forward to, and I'm kind of interested now that you are working in policy from for Catholic schools. Could you explain a little bit for people like me who are just starting out in Catholic schools, like what is it that you're working on as far as policy? You're working with a lot of superintendents and principals. Is it like pedagogy? Is it like different? I saw that you have a project through the Roche Center that's working on bilingual
Mhm.
schools. And I don't know how it works. I'm curious if there's like a top down kind of pedagogy or whatever for Catholic schools, or if it's more freedom. Could you explain a little bit of that for me?
Sure. So in terms of the Roche Center and working on ed policy, um, first off, I'd say ed policy can be defined in a few ways. And so these are even off of some of Melody's notes too. But in the like the large, broad context, like meaning state legislation, the Roche Center really doesn't work on ed policy at this level. Um, like so we teach school leaders going through the program. So one of our programs is called the Catholic Leadership Cohort,
Mm.
and so through the School of Ed there's a degree program called Ed Leadership, right, that anyone at a Catholic school, public school, charter school can enroll in. But then we have what we call the Catholic Leadership Cohort. So they those who are in this cohort take those courses, but then it's almost like a plus more. We have some courses that would be directed specifically to those who are committed to Catholic Ed. And then kind of similar to ACE in that community is really important and spirituality is really, really important. And so together, those who are in this program meet monthly with a professional learning community. So fellow members of the cohort, and then also like a coach. So whether that be a superintendent or a experienced principal leading them. And then we have opportunity for retreats each semester, and I'm actually leading some of them through the spiritual exercises right now. So in terms of like what we're doing at the Roche Center and policy wise in some of their courses that we require, like whether it be through their degree, but then through what we require as that Catholic leadership cohort, the leaders do learn about policy in, say, they have an ed law course. And so topics could range from policy for students with special needs or federal funding for private schools, such as like title funds or parental choice. But in terms of policy in regards to like school level practice, we really don't do that necessarily through the Roche Center, through the leaders at that time. It's more through this program. So I don't know if that answers what you're saying. You had mentioned about twin, so the dual language
Mhm.
schools. So basically, it's a network of schools, and so what we do is we foster the connection, the relation among them, so that they can be coached throughout on best practices, and then also come to learn from each other, and then even just like be in conversation and community with each other, even though they're all over the country. And then in terms of the supers, when you're asking what we do with the superintendents, so that's another professional learning community. Again, it's an opportunity to bring people together for conversation, learning, and growth, especially like in this last year with COVID,
Yeah.
to have that opportunity to have discussions with people from all across the country, and what are they doing like last March in terms of like shutdown, or what are they doing all summer in preparation to be able to reopen safely. So to be able to have that conversation and facilitate that has been really special. But in terms of like drilling down, this is a policy that needs to be pushed and things like that, that's not really what our center is doing at this point.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. That's helpful. And now as we kind of look forward into the future of Catholic education, um, where do you see that going? Because I would assume that probably the goals of Catholic education, while at the foundation are probably the same, might change a little bit as with generations. With now we have obviously the internet, and so where do you see Catholic schools? Where do you see the future of Catholic schools going? And I think I'm specifically interested in how will Catholic schools continue to differentiate themselves and remain, like we're talking about earlier, kind of special and distinct amongst other types of schools in this next couple decades, probably.
Sure. I think Catholic schools in general, they're not in, they don't have an easy journey, is what I'm saying. So if you look back at like how schools started, so many people who were leading schools and teaching schools were religious. And so they had their vow of poverty, they lived in community, and this was their mission, to serve in this way, right? And now with so many less religious, like those who are taking those vows and being ordained in that way, the reality is you have people who need to be paid
Yeah.
in order to live and raise families. And so I think between the staffing issue, but then also then you have the other side of the families themselves and different costs and tuitions. It all jumbles together. It's like a chicken and the egg thing, right? But because schools have to pay their teachers, they need to raise their tuitions in order to do so. Because the tuitions are so high, so many people can't afford to pay tuition, so then they can't go. So I think ultimately down the road, what needs to happen, truthfully, is I think Catholic schools need to work together. I think so often they're such gems, they really are. But so often, because they're in a sense in competition for the same students, they lose sight of working together for that broader mission, and they're kind of doing what they need to do in order to continue to survive and thrive. And so, truthfully, what do I see? I see that there probably isn't enough room for as many Catholic schools as there are to go on and be these exceptional places academically, spiritually, communally, given the numbers of people who are either able to go or interested in going at this point. I mean, also insert all the Catholic Church scandal and all that. And so then there'd be like that many less people who are practicing Catholics or wanting to send their children into Catholic institutions, right? And so I think as we in that like more global view can look at, okay, so how are we best able to serve? It's going to be through those different communities. Like I said, the superintendents having conversations, the networks of schools, so that people really are conversing and sharing best practices to be doing what is most effective and successful. By doing that, yes, it may mean that some smaller schools may not be able to continue, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean that then those students aren't served or those teachers aren't able to work. Maybe it's trying to see how we can come together as more partnerships, more networks, and things like that. So I really do think it's important that, as hard as it is to see from like a school level, what it would mean to be like more selfless for the greater good, but to be able to see from that like bird's eye view how are we maintaining our mission and serving these children in the best way possible? And it may be that it's that we need to collaborate more and work together. And yes, change is hard, but it doesn't necessarily mean change is bad. It's just different. But my hope is that, yes, we will be able to do that, and that Catholic schools will still be able to continue to teach and form, future leaders.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. It makes sense. So I'd like to wrap up our conversation with this one last fun question that I try to ask people, and it's, if you had a billboard that you could, metaphorically speaking, place somewhere that everybody's going to see it. Maybe you're placing it and it's just plastered across Gasson, or it's in the middle of 95, and everybody's going to see this message that you're putting up on this billboard. What do you think you would put on it?
I think I'm going to steal from ACE, actually. So they have, I don't know what they're calling this network of schools, but basically they say, like, what is the purpose of our schools? And the purpose of our schools is like, to make it like tangible goal would be to prepare these children for college and for heaven. Mm. And so I would put something up there about, Catholic schools, Catholic school goal, college and heaven, or something like that.
Yeah, it's I think that's a great place to wrap up our conversation. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your stories and your wisdom after being through in Catholic education for longer than I have, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It sounds great, and best of luck to you in ACE. It's so many great people out there, so you're lucky to be there, and you have my email if you ever want to reach out or anything.
I'm super excited.